So if you think about that as putting your information as a federal provider of services into this thing called a cloud, that's a really scary place. What is NEAM's role in helping shore that up? So there are lots of paths. And whichever path we take, or many paths we take, I think there are a few things important to note. So NEAM needs to go no faster than or no slower than and keep up with what's happening around identity access management control. So there's a couple of frameworks out there, the FICAM, the Federal Identity something access management. Credentialing. Yeah, I knew it. It was like C. What was that C for? I just know it's FICAM. I've read it. I know it, but it's the FICAM. And the GFIPM, the Global Federated Identity and Privilege Management, that you will hear about at the conference if you stay. So there's a couple of best-of-breed networks. There's the Trusted Broker out of DOJ in conjunction with GFIP. We can't NEAM as a program move any faster or slower than them. We need to make sure what we do incorporates what they need to do with our data. The other thing is that we need to stay committed to UCORE. How many people here know what UCORE 2.0 is? All right, so UCORE 2.0 was a coming together of 4 federal agencies. You don't normally see them in the same room without sneers, right? So it's the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security. We partner already. We kind of like each other. It's the Department of Defense and the Department of National Intelligence. They like each other. They partner. Sometimes he doesn't like me so much. So, and it's those agencies who have different models of how they do information sharing, different models of how they do their data modeling, coming together saying, at a minimum, we need interoperability between NEAM and what you're doing in the DoD D&I universe. And so there's a steering committee. I'm on the steering committee for the DHS representative. But there's a steering committee that says UCORE will always be compatible, interoperable, harmonized, with NEAM. And so everything that's in UCORE is in NEAM, was already in NEAM, is in NEAM now, will always be in NEAM, kind of as we go forward, unless they, blow it out to be terribly large. EDXL in NEAM. EDXL in NEAM. I think we have made so much progress in the past 2 months, I'd like to jump for joy, except I have heels on, so it wouldn't be very pretty. So the emergency data exchange languages. This is a series of specifications that come out of the OASIS standard body. So there's a CAP, which is the Common Alerting Protocol 1.1, I believe we're at. And then there's 1.2, yeah. And then there's the more complicated version of CAP, I call it, the more complicated version of CAP called the distribution element. Both of them are routing messaging kind of protocols for sending around information. Something happened, I need to send out some information to some resources and maybe get some information back, those types of things. And when I first joined the Department of Homeland Security, there was a lot of rife. You can do EXL, but you can't do NEAM. You can do NEAM, but you can't do EXL. And I kept saying, yeah, you're crazy. All of you, you're crazy. You can do both. So we finally have, today, we have the OASIS EDXL group co-locating their interoperability summit with NEAM because guess what? You can do both. And we're going to commit to ensuring that we have that messaging, we have that interoperability, and we go forward with that. The new one, which not quite sure where we're going with this one, is our conversations with XBRL and finding that value. And so on the surface, XBRL and NEAM are similar kind of programs, right? So XBRL has big taxonomies. We call them domains, vocabularies. But they're basically the same thing. And they have a kind of way to use those. And that's probably about where we fall short. After that, it gets a little complicated. But what we're hoping to gain out of our partnership with XBRL US and the NEAM program is an understanding, first of all, where you use NEAM and where you use XBRL. And it is not an us versus them. It is often, what are you doing and which one do you apply for what you're doing. But there are often also cases, as we talk through them, on where you could use them both and enrich the process. For example, in high-level fraud applications around financial reporting information, fraud's a big issue for FEMA, disaster assistance. And so if anyone's read any of the reports on Katrina, the number was somewhere like around $70 million ridiculous dollars in fraud. And so packaging a transactional level NEAM-based message with some XBRL financial reporting on top of it might help some traceability. It might help the auditing process of that, right? So we're looking at sort of those use cases on where you can combine them and create a better story. So a little bit of that feature. The rest of it, I'm going to leave to a little time, leave some questions. I'm going to leave you just with some notes. There are some things in our technology and structure on how we use NEAM today. Today we use NEAM as XML implementations at XSD. Doesn't mean it will be tomorrow, right? So, and there's some probably we'll talk about things around the IEPD specification itself. What is that specification? It's a really great specification, as you heard here today from Clark and from a lot of people, but what is the future of moving that forward? But mostly, we'll talk a little bit about the people. NEAM is a program that started by implementers, for implementers, and we need to make sure it stays that way. And so we need to find different mechanisms for you to talk to us, the program office. So if you haven't found me, I tweet under the NEAM exec directory, NEAM exec dir. Follow me if you so dare. Also, we have a group on LinkedIn. This was somewhat of a social experiment for me at DHS, not knowing how far I could push the boundaries in social networking. And so I started a group on LinkedIn. And within probably 24 hours, we had almost 300 people. So immediately I knew that we were missing our capability to talk with vendors and to talk with state and locals. And today we have probably over 900 members of that group. And so if you're not on LinkedIn, find the NEAM group on LinkedIn, and we are going to be using Twitter. So I'm going to close with that and tease you on coming Thursday morning.
Thank you, Donna. All right. Questions? Comments? Arguments? All of the above. Yes, sir.
Didn't work. Could you compare and contrast NEAM to that, the big data model in the Sky efforts versus NEAM?
So I'm not quite sure what you're asking me, because we are doing enterprise data modeling at the Department of Homeland Security outside of NEAM. And so I think that data modeling is an art that's maturing. So we just say that. Maybe a few years ago, telling people to do an Uber enterprise model scared the pants off of them. 2 years ago, it scared the pants off of most of my DHS components, and yet they are now doing it, right? So we're building enterprise-wide models. I do think, though, that NEAM does suffer from a messaging that says we're trying to be that Uber model, and that we're trying to be that model for the federal government. And let me tell you, we're not trying to be the Uber model. We're not trying to be the model of models, right? So NEAM isn't going to be that, nirvana to solve that, let's build the biggest data model in the world for everyone. Does that answer your question?
It points in the right direction, but it would take a long conversation, so we can do it offline.
Sure. Sir?
Just a future-based question. Do you foresee NEAM to blossom into more of an international type standards where we can collaborate with our allies?
We already do collaborate with our allies. We have international people using NEAM now. So I'm going to start listing them, and you can add it. Eurojust out of The Hague. We have NEAM is being used in Scotland Yard. I always like saying that because that's kind of cool. NEAM is being used in Scotland Yard.
She's obviously never been to Scotland Yard.
It sounds cool, right? Doesn't it sound cool? So NEAM is also being used or being analyzed for use in Australia. In the Netherlands have done things with NEAM. I'm not sure I understand.
Last 2 days ago, we had a meeting with our partners in Canada. And Canada it was the Cross-Border Crime Forum, And P6C, for any of you who know there, have put forward a proposal for the use of NEAM as the data model for Canada, which was an interesting proponent as they put it forward in the meeting the other day. So,
and we have Canada Public Safety is coming to this conference. We have people from the UK coming to this conference and people from Eurojust coming to this conference. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how fast can we partner more with our allies out there.
and again, it's around the concept of let's call the same thing, let's use the standard to make sure we can communicate better across, because we're all saying the same thing in the end. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I was at the FOSSI presentation, and if anybody else was there, you had a strange difference in the presentation Louis Freed did, talking about security and privacy of data. And then was it Vivek who was there that was then talking about transparency and open? It was from the CIO's office, from the new one. It used to be from D.C.
Vivek's office? The federal CIO's office?
The federal CIO.
Yes.
Vivek Kundra.
Okay. And he was talking about the transparency that you got from the new administration. I've also worked in a couple of DHS agencies where privacies are huge issues. How does all the push for information sharing, how do you control it when even a lot of times you can't get people to let go of their data, even within the agency, to people who should see it?
Well, privacy is a huge concern across all of federal government. It was in previous administrations. It is certainly a hallmark in this administration, and it will continue and should continue, as we move forward. From the standpoint of the Department of Justice, I can tell you that we have extensive discussions around any time data is collected. So anytime it's collected, why is it collected? What are you going to do with it? Is it going to be kept? Who's going to see it? What are all the specific data elements? What's your legal basis for it? So I would argue, however, that those concerns have always been around the collection of data. So the fact that data has been collected forever. It's just a matter of now we are getting much more cognizant of ensuring that the appropriate policies and protections are in place to ensure that the data is collected properly, that it is utilized for the proper entities, and then that it is purged as required. So when we developed the SAR, we probably taking longer than the development of the IAPD was the development of the privacy policy and the vetting of that policy across entities such as all the privacy entities across the United States that were looking at what we were doing to say, hey, this is okay, or you guys have to stop. And to actually have them come out and say that what we are doing appears to be headed in the right direction and that we have put the appropriate safeguards in place to ensure the privacy of individuals is protected was a huge, huge step forward for us. So, we have to continue with privacy walking lockstep as we move forward with NEAM and with any data gathering issues. Donna?
So, and I just want to add that NEAM wasn't created to solve that issue, right? So NEAM's not going to solve the privacy policy issue around how you share your data. NEAM solves the common understanding, that common language. But when you implement NEAM, boy, sure do you run into those issues, right? And I'll just close with this, and I know we need to get to the next panel, but it always helps when you bring privacy in on the first conversation.